Hello everyone, this is Miss P, and today we're going to be talking about implicit and explicit attitudes. And an attitude is just an evaluation or a feeling we have about a person, place, thing, or idea. And they form in our brain, and they also make us who we are in many, many ways. So first, let's start off with a little scenario that can help you to understand. Let's say you're starting a new program or a new team or a new school, and you're looking for people to talk to and be friends with, and you don't know anyone, and you see someone with a Boston Red Sox jersey. You happen to be a huge Sox fan, and immediately you think to yourself, awesome, I'm really going to like this person. I'd love to talk to them. You feel really comfortable going up to them and starting a conversation. This is an example of an explicit attitude because you are totally conscious of how you feel. This attitude exists on the conscious level. You also deliberately formed this opinion or this evaluation. You've watched the Red Sox for a really long time. You've gone to some of their games. Maybe you watch them on TV. You read stats and learn about the players. And also because it's easy for you to self-report. You will tell anyone who will listen that you're a Red Sox fan and that you hate the Yankees. Let's think of another example. Let's say you're out to dinner, maybe with your friends or family, and suddenly you feel a totally uncomfortable feeling, and your family or your friends ask you what's wrong, and you have no idea what's going on, but just something doesn't feel right inside. And this feeling of discomfort could be maybe because someone around you has the same voice as an elementary school teacher who was really, really mean to you when you were growing up, and you have a lot of really negative memories about hearing this voice. This feeling that you have is an example of an implicit attitude. This feeling was completely formed on the unconscious level. You had no idea that you didn't like people with a voice like your elementary school teacher. It's also involuntarily formed. You had nothing to do with the formation of this bias that you have. And lastly, it's unknown to you. You totally didn't know that this is how you felt. And so this is an implicit attitude. Implicit attitudes can actually contradict explicit attitudes, and this can be a really confusing idea. But basically, you can feel a certain way outwardly and totally consciously form an opinion or an evaluation or an attitude, but really inside, you have an unconscious bias or an unconscious negative feeling associated with it. An example would be, let's say there's someone named Greg, and he really believes in equality. He loves everyone. He grew up in a small town without much diversity, but he totally believes that everyone's created equal, and he doesn't have any problem with anyone with any kind of difference. However, when Greg drives through a neighborhood that's really different from his and maybe has a lot of Black and Latino people, he begins to feel very, very nervous and uncomfortable. And this feeling sort of shows up out of nowhere. It's not a conscious thing that he creates in his mind. This is an example of an implicit attitude becoming an implicit bias. An implicit bias is when someone consciously rejects stereotypes and really believes in equality and works towards anti-discrimination, but still holds negative associations unconsciously in their mind about certain people. And these unconscious feelings or associations actually can impact their behavior. How does this happen? As human beings, we are totally programmed to categorize, sort, and point things out by difference or sort things by difference. And so it totally makes sense for our brains to do this. We look for patterns in the world and we try to categorize the world. And these biases are formed really, really, really young before you have any say in it. And over time, they're reinforced. They're reinforced by the fact that people mostly hang out with people who are very similar to them. This increases our comfort with people who are like us and increases our suspicion of people who are outsiders who are not like us. And just because it's natural for our brains to work this way doesn't mean we have to accept it as a fact. If we can look at how our brains work, we can actually move our focus from sort of our biased thinking to actually working on them. So we can actually trick our brain to not have these biases or to reduce them. And it's really important that we do this because bias actually impacts behavior and it really causes people to get unequal treatment in many ways. when we have the idea that people who are like us are more trustworthy, less dangerous, more competent, these can have really disastrous results. For example, if we live in a neighborhood with people like us, we listen to music that promotes stereotypes, we watch television that has a lot of stereotypical characters, perhaps we have people around us who say things that have discriminatory tones to them, and we sort of are always with people who are similar to us, we start to form these biases. And this can affect medical care, treatment by police, education and teachers. It can affect how a judge or a jury sentences or looks at your case. It can affect your ability to get jobs. If you've ever been followed by a store clerk in a store because they thought you might steal, perhaps you've seen some implicit bias come out. And so this has very, very real repercussions for people when we let our implicit biases go unchecked. So here is some ways that we can actually reduce them. The most important thing is to move from guilt and move towards action, because it's easy to feel guilty about discriminatory thoughts or feelings that we may have, but it's important to remember that these are unconscious and these are formed based on things that we've been exposed to in the world around us, and we can actually take actions to reduce it. There is a great website put together by MTV called lookdifferent.org that actually has a 7-day bias cleanse and looks really interesting. You can check it out if you'd like. And you can also check out implicit bias tests at Project Implicit, and this was a study done by folks at Harvard that looks at our implicit associations in relation to all different categories: race, gender, age, ability, mental health status. And it's really a great resource to try to identify if these biases exist. Most people have implicit biases, and so that's why we're doing this activity, to help you learn how to reduce them. Some other things you can do to reduce bias. You can learn about it, and that's what you're doing right now, which is great. And you can also try to acknowledge and learn about the biases that you may have in your own head and in your own feelings. You can also learn about other people. Learn about people who are different from you. Find examples of black people who aren't just rappers or athletes, and think about them and learn about them. One study actually had people just look at pictures of people who violated stereotypes. And, for example, looking at a very powerful woman. And that actually can help you to work on your biases. Another thing you can do is form deep relationships with those who are different from you. And this helps your brain to stop the negative associations that naturally form. Lastly, as you go through your everyday, if you see something or hear something that reinforces stereotypes or biases, say something. And you don't always have to say something right in the moment. You can take time and think about it and come back to your friend or come back to your teacher or an adult in your life and tell them, you know what, we're learning about biases and what you said kind of reinforced one. And always feel free to tell an adult if you don't feel comfortable addressing a situation. And remember to just keep learning, and that's the best way to reduce your implicit bias. Thank you. Have a great day.